We are at a multi-sensory conference. I'm a junior researcher for Flavour Sense Nation, and I'm here today running some activities.
Okay, we're at the Multisensory Design Conference at UAL, just having some really fun sensory exhibitions.
We are at a multi-sensory conference. I'm a junior researcher for Flavour Sense Nation, and I'm here today running some activities which explore how the senses impact taste and flavour, and I'm running activities about sight. I am a graduate from Science Communication Masters at Imperial, and during my Masters I found out about Flavour Sense Nation and found out about the junior research role, and that's how I became involved. At events like this, I do experiments and activities using food, which explore how your senses impact taste and flavour. Today I've been focusing on sight, but I've also done workshops in school where I look at other senses such as hearing and touch and smell and how they impact taste and flavour. So I really enjoy doing the events. It's really fun interacting with the public and getting them to try experiments and get them involved. Tonight there's been quite a lot of surprise, some of the activities they've done, people not realising how much impact senses can have, which is really interesting to see the public's reaction. And then when working in schools, it's also really interesting kind of understanding what the children know already and getting them to learn new things and see how their understanding develops over the course of a workshop. So the stall I've been working on today is about sight. So I give people the option of choosing an apple to eat from two bowls just by sight. So how do they choose which apple they'd like to eat? One is kind of a perfect apple and one is slightly bruised, and kind of talking about what made them make their decision, what has impacted their choice, and showing that they're just using their sense of sight before anything else. And then I move on to getting them to try a green coloured sweet and asking them what fruit flavour the sweet is, before going on to demonstrate an experiment called Kiki and Booba, which is to do with shapes and how sight and taste and shapes all interact. Yeah, I think everyone reacts in different ways. Some people are aware of how much impact sight can have, whereas others don't really think about it until you talk to them about it. I suppose it's kind of subconscious. And also having interesting discussions with people about how sights of certain foods can have negative associations or positive associations, so kind of taking the discussion off in different and interesting angles.
We are actually holding an exhibition with sense stations, explaining how explaining the flavor behind science. Okay, we're at the Multisensory Design Conference at UAL, just having some really fun sensory exhibitions explaining the science behind flavor. Well, I was actually brought onto the Flavour Sense Nation team by Lily to help coordinate our science engagement program between FSN and primary schools, and she just asked me to help on out today, so I said yes, and I'm really excited about it. I actually got involved in this project because I was originally brought onto the team for a science engagement program between the primary schools of London and Flavour Sense Nation. So some of our sensory exhibits involve sense stations, and we're explaining certain things like how hearing affects our experience of taste. So for example, I was at the hearing station, and it was really fun interacting with everybody at the conference, teaching them a little bit about how hearing affects your other senses and your whole experience of taste. So what I did was I took a shaker and I would shake it next to their ear while they were eating tortilla chips. And so the first shaker was actually filled with marshmallows, and so it kind of had a muffled sound. It was like pum pum pum. And so while they're eating it, they actually most people I found felt that that tortilla chip actually wasn't as crunchy or crispy, as opposed to the second shaker, which was I think filled with rice, and when it shook it was very loud, very sharp, and they found that one to be a lot more crunchy, a lot more salty. So yeah, and they came out of it learning something about how senses interact with each other to influence our overall taste experience. Well, as a science communicator, this was definitely really, really great practice for me. And I found it so interesting interacting with so many people of different backgrounds and really seeing that awe and shock in their face when they learn something new. And it's just something that they never really considered in how our senses affected the taste that we that we taste. So
Just do that bit, how our senses affect this method.
So how our senses affect our taste. Or just how we taste.
Okay, just run that for us. So how our senses.
How our senses affect our taste.
Yeah, good.
It's definitely a really interactive and effective way of teaching the science behind flavor because people actually get to have that first-hand experience. You're not really giving them the answer necessarily, but they are experiencing something, and after they experience it, you explain the science behind it, and it just clicks with them. That kind of fun, interactive way makes it so enjoyable, and they're very open and receptive to it, and they come to you as a scientist to learn more about it. And it's just because they're so open to it, because it's just such an interactive and fun experience, they want to learn, and I think that very desire is what makes this form of science communication so great.
So the idea of all the senses, understanding them better and then knowing how to combine them and how to combine them to make a better environment, which is really what we're trying to do with the conference here, is trying to get something which is out of the box, getting people to think slightly differently about the way that they perceive their environment. So it's not just about buildings and architecture and design and what you see. Silkworms, and we had ants. As well as everything else. So it was really exciting. I've had such a good time, and I'm going to continue to have a good time. I liked being introduced to new foods that I hadn't tasted before. I'd always heard about silkworms, I'd always heard about ants, I'd heard about mealyworms, but I hadn't actually eaten them, and they're quite nice. Actually, I like the smallest ones, and nobody told me what they were, but they were salty and crunchy and rather nice. And then afterwards there was a whole buffet of things which I'm going to go back to, but with all sorts of tastes, like carrots which were fermented and turnips which were fermented. And do I sound like a foodie? Because yes, it stimulates so many senses when you're talking about it, and it just makes you want to go and try different things. And I think that's really what this evening has been about. It's been about trying different things and trying to, and getting a greater understanding about all the senses and about what flavour and taste and all of that is about. So many things that I perhaps learned about before through study, they come to life when you're in a place like this, when you can actually physically taste something, smell something, hear something. There were fire noises and sulfur noises, as well as unusual flavours. And I have yet to try the chocolate with the crickets. So that will be my parting shot. Chocolate with crickets, and then I'm off. Virtual experience doesn't do the half of what a real experience does when you can actually taste something, smell something, learn from it. I'm going home with a whole bunch of questions that I'm now going to have to follow up, because this is just the beginning of the journey. So it's wonderful.
Do you want to stay here for a while?
Okay, basically what I had to do was eating a biscuit, and I had to touch a really rough surface. And for me, the biscuit was really sweet. And then I had to eat another biscuit and touching a really soft, smooth surface. And for me, the whole taste of it was very superficial and very flat too. So for me, the the first biscuits was really sweet, and like the smell and the taste of it was more intense, and that was what I really liked about it. So what I enjoyed was, like, while touching the really rough surface, that I was surprised by having that explosion of sweetness in my mouth. So what I learned is that the 5 senses are not separately from each other, but they interact with each other, like a dialogue. I think that when I'm designing, for example, an art object, that of course the smell, but also the surfaces in that specific environment or room or place also plays a major role in the experience of the visitors. So what I specifically liked about this event and the stuff you could really try and experience yourself is that you can also apply it to your own professional practice, and you can collect experiences and take that forward.
So I did I tasted a biscuit, and I had to feel a smooth tray. And then I tasted the same biscuit, and then I felt a tray that had sort of gravel stone embedded in it. And the taste experience was very different. I didn't enjoy the one with the gravel stone. It seemed to taste a little bit sandy, which was really weird because I've never had that experience before. And then I did the sound one. So she had a tube with some sort of material inside, and she was shaking it as I ate a Dorito. And the first one was an okay sound, more like a musical sound, and Dorito tasted fine. The second one was a very harsh sound. It was like stones, little stones or something. And I didn't enjoy the Dorito. It actually tasted like I was eating glass. That's the sensory experience I got. So that was really, really weird. I grew up understanding that you eat with your eyes first, so it was always about how you view the food and the presentation, and then obviously the smell has an impact, but I never considered sound or touch, but of course it makes sense because all senses are interlinked, so it was just really enjoyable to know that my experience can be influenced by all senses rather than just the smell or the vision. If you explained that to me, if you said to me the sound's going to affect how you taste the food, I wouldn't have believed you. There's no chance. If you said feeling a surface would affect how you taste the food and how you experience, I wouldn't have believed you in a million years. So the fact that I experienced it was the enjoyment, because now I understand a little bit. The next time I don't enjoy some food, I'm going to be looking at the sound and the tablecloth and all this stuff, whereas usually I just used to think I don't like the look of it or I don't like the taste of it. So that was really cool. I think Leonardo da Vinci, said, if you look closely enough, everything's connected. And the more I do things like this, the more I realize that everything is connected and that we shouldn't ever discount anything that affects our experience.
I actually ate some ginger biscuit, and while my hand was over a rough surface, and I did the same thing with my hand over a smooth surface. And it's amazing, when over the rough surface, I could really taste the ginger. But on the smooth surface, it was just the texture. So there was obviously some interplay between the senses of my taste and touch. Yeah. Well, it was an awareness experience that in life we're living by our senses basically, but a lot of them we pass by in a rush of everyday life. And just with this extra bit of concentration and focus on a particular thing, the taste of this biscuit in different circumstances gave me a whole new depth, and it really was a lasting experience. So I really enjoyed it. So this gave me a whole new outlook on what we should be doing in environmental sensory design of buildings. We must impart this extra enjoyment and pleasure you get by focusing people's attention on particular things. It might be colour, it might be the view out of the window, it might be just the space, furniture, whatever it is. But all these things can arrest one's attention and give one an extra lift in mood. And therefore we work and live better.
I went through all the sensory experiences we had here on offer, and I want to highlight the one about smell. And the question we were asked, do you know the difference between flavour and smell? I pondered and thought, no, even though I constantly use those words interchangeably. We then closed our nose, tasted something, and didn't really know what it was. Then we opened our nose and then discovered that it was cinnamon.
So I tried some fizzy grapes by Flavor Sense Nation, and they looked like a grape, and they felt like a grape in my fingers, and then put them in my mouth, and they didn't feel like a grape. And inside they were kind of ever so slightly fizzy in a very pleasant way, and I was intrigued by that difference. So I was asking the person who handed them out how that was made, and I loved the ideas of what they'd done with the science there, taking it in a very playful way, trapping the grapes in a box with some dry ice and finding that actually infuses the grapes with this fizz over time, which then you can experience in such a delightful way. But yeah, I access that through my mouth and infuses the grape with fizz.
I never thought about how texture affects the way that I eat, how touching something would potentially affect something that's happening in my mouth. So I'd never thought about that before, and it was really interesting. Of course, it's a great way to learn new things. How would it not be if you're eating something and you're interacting with somebody? Definitely. It's a great way to learn new things.
So the taste sensation I tried was bits of sort of scent on a stick waved under my nose, and the one I found most surprising was mushrooms, which I love. I just couldn't recognise the scent. I thought it was leaves, I thought it was something clinical, so it was really interesting to know that one of my favourite vegetables I didn't even recognise the scent of. Cucumber, however, I just knew instantly. So yeah, it was really interesting to learn about my own sense of smell and how much I would recognise one thing rather than another. So it was fascinating to learn through smell and taste, whereas I usually, as an illustrator, I would rely on visuals so much. So yeah, it was just a great learning experience to realise how much we rely on different senses, and how, if one's removed, how much that actually affects the experience. It was great to sort of experience using a different sense. I really enjoyed that, because I feel like in day-to-day we only ever really use sight or hearing, but it was really great to use my taste and my smell to kind of distinguish what something was. Really great learning experience.